The branded product business also in the pharma sector, that's something that you've been looking at for a long time. You wanted more brands to be acquired by the company, though you have a strong portfolio right now. So are international brands also something under your radar?
We are looking at acquiring brands in the OTC segment, but the valuations of brands have gone really high, and unless we find that we can get a return on those and in a predefined period, we can't do that. So our struggle today is to identify good opportunities which give us the return that we're expecting.
So in the present economic scenario also, you are not seeing the valuations coming down?
The valuations as far as brands is concerned in the OTC space is still very high.
Okay, so like you waited for the land prices to come down and then acquire, probably in the OTC space also you'll do that?
Yeah, if there's an opportune moment, we will do that.
Okay, and talking about your NBFC space then, what is the plan there? Of course, banking license will probably take some time. So is that really your focus area then?
Today, for instance, in the NBFC, we are focused on real estate and education. Now, in real estate, if you have a good industry knowledge, which I believe we have, we can assess, we know who the customers are, who you can risk or lend money to, who you would keep away from. Also, that's a sector which the banks are not willing to fund. So there is a good opportunity for a company like us to be in that sector.
Now, looking at your entire portfolio and your entire group at the moment, it looks like now you have, as you were also mentioning, that now you're not going to diversify into many sectors. You have taken your pick and this is what you're going to grow with. So as I see it, all of them are still at a nascent stage waiting to flourish. Which ones in the future would you see as separately listed companies or separate entities on their own?
So as you said, it's still a nascent stage, so I think it's premature to say which is going to be listed or not. Though they're not all in the nascent stage, if I can say, so DRG is one which is not a nascent stage. It has a good revenue, it has a good cash flow, and it has a good future ahead. So it's not all nascent, but yes, it's a mix of both of them.
The entire gloom and doom situation in the country, industrial output is contracting, inflation is at a sticky rate above 7%, and also the foreign investors are not very happy. The sentiment is down because of the retrospective tax implications. So with all this right now, do you think are we going through the worst economic times that you've seen?
I think so. We're going through a very, very challenging economic scenario, and we have to do something about it, because India is a country which is actually capital starved. If we have to build the infrastructure, if we have to build new areas where we have huge opportunities in this country, you have to attract capital. And today we are not being able to attract FDI, so that's one area. The markets in India are still good. If you look at the middle class, it is, I mean, all the demographics are in our favor. So we have to get the policies and we have to get action on those policies.
Has it personally really affected your decision making as far as Indian growth is concerned, or growing or expanding your business?
So even after when we sold our business in 2010, and that's when we looked at several areas in infrastructure. And we had so many proposals, whether it was in power, whether it was in roads, whether it was in so many other areas. And one of the reasons why we decided against doing that is because we felt that there was not enough transparency in the decision making. And some of the people who got into this space were people who didn't have a track record. So obviously there were no barriers to entry, or there were people who ought not to have been there. And now you can see the consequences of that. Therefore, we decided against that, and I'm glad we decided against that. But does it mean that we are never going to invest? No. When there is a clarity of policies, when we find that it is a level playing field, we will invest.
Mr. Piramal, there have been lots of talks about you looking at various deals, acquiring various assets as well. Future Capital Holdings has been one of them. Are you really looking at that space? Does it really bring value to the table and to your company?
So I never say no to anything, and especially with our record on inorganic things. So yes, if there is something interesting, if it makes economic sense, if it makes strategic sense, we can do it.
Talking about pharma again, you've been an expert, you've been in the industry for such a long time. How do you see the present pharma industry doing in the domestic market? Is there a tectonic shift of any kind?
The domestic market, I see that the growth rates in the pharma industry are what we had seen earlier. So that's the good news as far as growth rates is concerned, because we have to realize that even now only 40% of our population is covered with modern medicine. But I see sometimes there's a concern, if I see from the outside, is on the regulatory process. So when I see what's happening in terms of the whole pricing, pharma is a very competitive industry, and yet why do we need such a wide range of price controls? What I see in terms of intellectual property that's happening in the, say, that compulsory licensing and intellectual property, that's a matter of concern for me. I'm also concerned about why do we want to put restrictions on FDI? This was a liberal industry. So these are some of the concerns, but these are more as somebody who's on the outside rather than being really affected, because our pharma business today is much more globally oriented than India focused.
Okay, on that positive note, I would like just last thought from you, because we know that you're an avid reader and follower of Bhagavad Gita. Is there any particular thought which you always keep in mind and you like to share it with our viewers?
So the thought that I keep in mind, and especially when such transactions take place, is that one has to do one's duty, and if you do it well, the results will follow. One doesn't have to worry about the results. If you worry about the results, then even your act of doing it will actually be flawed. And you get a lot of strength if you just keep doing your duty.
And the results have clearly followed for you, Mr. Piramal. Thanks so much for your time. With that, we wrap up the very interesting conversation with Mr. Ajay Piramal of Piramal Healthcare.